Hello and welcome to Peace at Home Parenting Solutions. I'm Ruth Freeman, licensed clinical social worker and founder of Peace at Home. Today, I am delighted to be here with Guy Diamond, who is the founder of attachment-based family therapy. We've been talking with each other a lot about kids in therapy and how parents can support them. And Guy, I'm going to ask you to tell folks a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I have been primarily a youth suicide prevention and intervention scientist at the University of Pennsylvania for 20 years and then at Drexel for 20 years or 10 years. And we've been developing community-based tools to help identify suicidal youth in the community, primary care, schools. Um, we've been developing trainings to help teachers, doctors feel comfortable talking to kids about suicide, feel comfortable referring them for suicide. And we have programs all across the state and multiple states around the nation. The other side of my work has been what to do when the kid comes home from the hospital after an attempt or a serious enough event that she needs treatment or a diversion from treatment out of the emergency room. We developed a family therapy model to try to help teens recalibrate, get back in the saddle of life, help parents cope with the stress of having a troubled teen like this, go through a troubled event like this. And we've been doing that work for years and teach that work all over the world as well.
So you're also training therapists in this attachment-based family therapy model, which was designed around helping parents and kids come back together and repair around suicidal thoughts or behaviors, right?
Yeah, we see parents at this high risk population. Our goal is to help parents be the safety net. We are trying to reestablish them as a secure base, as a safe haven, so that the next time a kid feels like he wants to hurt himself, he'll come to mom and say, Mom, I need some help, rather than go in his room and take pills or cut himself, shoot himself, God forbid. So we're trying to improve communication in the family so that the parents can provide some protection when kids are feeling upset.
So today's conversation is really about um, children's mental health challenges in general. So we're not only talking about suicidal teens, but we've been working together with attachment-based family therapy specialists. Guy is a co-founder, and we're thinking about kids who are suicidal. However, children who have anxiety or depression or other diagnoses are all struggling right now. And the principles of the family as the safety net, Guy, I'm always assuming is more, can be more generally applied for an anxious child or a child struggling with depression or other issues, right?
Yeah.
So these principles that you've actually done research about. So, Guy, are you a marriage and family therapist? I never asked you this question.
I am actually by training and also a psychologist training.
Okay, so Guy understands the world of therapy, and his mission has been to find strategies that he can prove through research are actually effective. And quite frankly, as a therapist, I'm aware that there are not that many evidence-based approaches that we can point to hard science about. So that's why we're very excited to be partnering with attachment-based family therapy right now. So one of my pet peeves has been that schools and municipalities and state governments and federal governments are all throwing lots of funds at children's mental health right now because there's a pediatric mental health crisis. We have soaring rates of depression, anxiety, suicidality, all that. And obviously the pandemic threw oil on a fire that was already raging. We already had high rates, and now they're amazing, and frightening. And of course, now we have a lot of things going on in the international world that's increasing anxiety for everybody. So I guess I want to ask you, Guy, my issue is that parents are left out of most plans. It seems like we want more therapists for kids, more beds for hospitalization for kids, more medicators for kids. But in my experience, clinicians don't consistently engage parents in the treatment, nor do institutions. They make attempts, but as you've noted, therapists usually aren't trained in engaging parents. And at the same time, we have this perfect storm where Ohio State University has reported that 66% of working parents are experiencing burnout. And by burnout, they mean the symptoms may include increased anxiety, depression, and alcohol use in parents, working parents, as well as parents being more harsh in their parenting, and parents actually emotionally distancing from their kids to protect the little bit of bandwidth they have psychologically. And obviously, this is the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish in attachment-based family therapy. And many parents are hanging on by their fingernails, but not addressing their own issues simply because they believe that they're focusing on the kids is what really matters. So obviously, parents getting their own treatment is like an oxygen mask for parents. I just want to say that clearly before we start. However, you and I are trying to create programs for parents related to mental health. And I want to start by asking you, Guy, how can parents know if they should be more involved in their kids' treatment, and what can help them assess whether that's needed, and what steps should they take if they think, like, how do you know if my kid's anxious, I drop them off at the therapist talks to me every few weeks, tells me what kind of progress the child's making. How does the parent know, should I be doing more?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a complicated question,
You knew this wasn't going to be easy, Guy, didn't you?
Yeah. I mean, let's start with the assumption that, therapists out in the field are good people trying to do good work. I don't think they are excluding parents out of some, ill will, or I think we live in the mental health field is part of the medical model establishment where disorder has always been seen as within an individual, and anxiety, depression, it's a biological imbalance, it's a conflict between ego and id, if you go back to your Freudian world, and so most treatments that emerged over the last 100 years have focused on the individual. CBT is a great treatment. It's been proven to be effective with suicide and depression. It's still got a ways to go to be a solid treatment.
Cognitive behavioral therapy, that's what CBT
cognitive behavioral therapy. But I think it's partly the sociology of it. It's easy to teach. So it's in all the graduate schools. It's in all the hospitals, because it's easy to do. You get the kid, you do some worksheets. I mean, and we believe in it, and we send kids there all the time. But I think there's just been a general paradigm that disease is an individual experience. Now, the family systems world kind of grew up as a little bit of a rebellion against that idea. and started to think, I wonder if the environments kids live in might be contributing to some of the problems kids are having. This actually, if I can get a little historical, came up initially in the 1950s when they would send young kids developing schizophrenia, these are pretty severe psychiatric problems. And the kid would come to the hospital, would stabilize, would get on medication, would be seen to be more clear. And then the doctors would send the kid home, and within weeks, they'd be relapsing. And the hospital, this is really the birth of family therapy. The hospital started to think, I wonder if something's going on there that's contributing to, kids feeling less stable. So they started bringing families into the hospital for the therapy work and found lots of negative interactions, lots of overly anxious parents, lots of parents who had their own struggles and were unable to attend to a child's need. And the paradigm started to shift to say people live in a social environment and are influenced by the relationships around them. And so I think there's more thinking that you can't, and in fact, a lot of the CBT people now have added family therapy to their treatment because they know I can't just do work on one's cognitions. I have to help parents be more supportive, more consistent, more, less reactive. And that it's really working on both fronts that we make the most progress with kids, improving the family context, usually the parental skill set, and working on internal skills, medication, that it's the combination of these things seems to be the most productive.
So
So what, I mean,
no,
that's a big, just
it's a big response.
a general perspective change.
So
It doesn't answer your question, but
Guy didn't exactly answer my question, but this is my favorite part of talking to him. So that context is very helpful, Guy. Actually, I didn't know that whole history. And I think in a sense, what I'm here, I want to remind everybody, by the way, thank you for being here. And I want to remind you, you can raise your hand or send in a chat anytime, and we will get to you as soon as you can. Your questions will illuminate the conversation. It will keep us on target. It will be very helpful. So we want to hear from you. So what I'm hearing you say, Guy, is that pretty much any parent who has a child in treatment has a role to play. And I mean, I think particularly with teenagers, individual therapy makes a lot of sense. Sometimes I think with younger children, I get frustrated with individual therapy. I think it's not necessarily the best path. But even with teenagers, and especially that's who you study, parents don't recognize what a powerful influence they are. During adolescence, one of teenagers' jobs is to develop a tribe, develop a group that's going to help them launch. Teenagers that don't have at least one or two good friends have a much harder time launching. So and their brains are telling them, don't seek comfort from your parents as much as your friends, and move towards your peers. And at the same time, parents have enormous influence. And I've read that the number one reason that kids who don't use alcohol give for not using alcohol is they don't want to disappoint their parents and they don't want to lose their parents' respect. So it's a very confusing time for parents because you still have enormous influence, but it looks like you're getting kicked out of the group and it looks like you're mashed potatoes to your kid. And that's part of their job. So it's confusing. But nevertheless, I guess, I mean, this makes us seem like on the same page because I'm feeling.
let me
Yeah.
respond to that because
Yeah.
I think that's a um, worth highlighting. In the 50s, again, the developmental psychologists thought that the way to grow up was to individuate and separate. And anybody went to graduate school, read Erik Erikson's 10 Stages of Life, and that became the Bible. And we all felt like, yeah, this storm and stress was normal. I don't know if any of you at home listening here have tried to get away from your family as a way to work through and liberate yourself from the clutches of a difficult family environment. But I had a difficult mother, loved her a lot, very creative, inspirational, successful woman, but at home, clutches, insecure, complicated.
Hmm.
And so I thought, well, I'm just going to move to Philadelphia. I grew up in California. I'll move to Philadelphia. I'll be free of her. I can finally become who I want to be, And I get to Philadelphia and I open my suitcase. Who do you think was in there? And I'd really brought my mother with me and all the dilemmas and the pushes and the pulls and that going away doesn't work through. Going away leaves you stuck with old habits, old memories, old patterns.
If that's all you've done, if you've
that's
just
all you've done.
away.
Yeah. So the modern thinking about adolescent development, and it really comes out of attachment theory and developmental researchers here at Larry Steinberg at Temple's done 50 years of work on this, and that the real challenge for adolescents is to remain attached while developing autonomy. That it's about staying connected, evolving the connection. I'm not 7 anymore, but having the family still be my secure base as I go out in the world and explore and discover things. And if I get stressed or scared or disappointed, I still can go back to my family for recovery, for support, for help. And as I recalibrate, get rejuvenated, I go back out into the world again. So the attachment model that many of us know from childhood, when you're a toddler and you're out exploring on the playground and you fall off the jungle gym, you jump up, you run to mommy, you jump in her lap, you hope she hugs you and kisses your boo-boo. You settle back down and you go off and play again. And through this sense of secure base, sense that I know my mom will be there for me, I begin to internalize a sense of security, the ability to down-regulate my negative emotions. And I develop a sense of safety in the world. And that might be going on too long, but that same process is it's transformed, but it's just as active in adolescence. They need you just as much. It's just all looks a little different.
But I want to say that the way teenagers do this is very different, and it's much harder on parents, I think. As the mom, particularly, I remember my daughter. I'm a foster mom, a stepmom, and a bio mom.
Oh, wow.
And my biological daughter, the way she came and went, that rapprochement, that back and forth, it was obnoxious. And I had a psychiatrist who said the only job of the mother of a daughter, of a 16-year-old daughter, is to be wrong. And that's what it felt like, but that's how they separate. They criticize you, but they come back to you. They come back to criticize you. And part of it helps them to have that back and forth. But the back and forth, I think, is very hard on parents.
Yeah.
So I have a question here. How do I talk with my teens therapist so that their rapport and trust remains intact? But as parents, we can be aware of how to support them. Perfect question. Love that question. I want to say, Guy, please help me remember. I just want to read it again. How do I talk with my teens therapist so that their rapport and trust between the teenager and the therapist remain intact? But as parents, we can learn how to be aware of how to support them. Great question. And I just want to say, before we go, Guy, I just want to talk a little bit about parents' roles in therapy in general. And then let's address, and this might come up in this conversation. Do you want to speak to that a little? I have a few ideas, but I'd love to hear from you first.
Parents' role in therapy?
Well,
Big,
no.
or this
Responding to
particular
this
question?
question, my teenager's in therapy. I don't want to impact the rapport between therapist and teen, but at the same time, I want to know how to best support my teen.
Well, I mean, I'm a family therapist. I work with the entire family. I meet alone with the adolescent. I meet alone with the parents. I bring everybody together. We talk about all kinds of things. Um, and that's just how it gets set up in the beginning as a family therapy model.
But
So
really,
it's,
Guy, that's the exception in a lot of cases.
yeah,
And very often I mean, I think a typical scenario, specific, especially with teens, is that the teen sees the therapist and there's various kinds of agreements about what the parent receives from the
yeah,
therapist. There's all different kinds. And I think we just need to speak to how the parent navigates that inquiry about how to best support their child. And I have
yeah.
a couple of ideas, but do you have any specifics? Or I can say my ideas and then you
Yeah,
can.
why don't you say what you're thinking?
Okay, because you know the research much better than I. So a few thoughts that I have for parents of teenagers who are in therapy are: one is to start with the teenager. If you want to know how to support your teenager, one thing is to ask them. Now, they may say, give me more time on my screens and give me more money to buy games or, whatever. That might be one way they tell you to support them. But I do think it's worthwhile asking kids, are there things I do that really bug you? And what actually helps? What do I do that actually helps you feel more positive or more calm? Is there anything I do that helps you calm down? Blah, blah, blah. I would ask about that stuff very specifically of the kid. And if this has been strictly a teenager therapist relationship, I would say to the teenager, I want to talk with your therapist about how best to support you. And I want to let you know I want to have that conversation. Those are two initial ideas that come to me. Do you have any thoughts about either of those and any other suggestions, Guy?
Get a family therapist. my main
What?
suggestion.
What?
Get a family therapist to be my main suggestion.
Okay, so another suggestion is say to your child, I don't want to, affect the sanctity of your therapy relationship, but I'd like to talk with somebody to advise us also. Maybe the three of us or the whole family can go to see a family therapist together. That's a third option.
I mean, that's one way to go about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think Ruth's right. I mean, I, it, sitting down with your team and trying to create open communication is the foundation of family life and adolescent development. If that hasn't been the way it's been because of challenges and problems, that's harder then to get that initiated if there's a lot of ill will from the past or power struggles from the past or difficult things in the family from the past. It's harder to recalibrate and jumpstart a new relationship and, without some professional guidance. If I've had a pretty good relationship with my kid, and we've gotten along and there's tranquility at home, and always bumps in the road and fighting about curfew and fighting about dirt, laundry. I mean, those are normative things. you know Arguing about some small day-to-day things, getting up on time, or getting your homework done. Those aren't psychiatric problems. Those are day-to-day problems. The problem is when those arguments become insidious, when those arguments become hurtful, painful, when we start to say things we don't mean, when we start to make accusations about our kids, when they start to get excessively angry about it, then something's off. That means something's not going right, and we need help, or we need to sit down and have a family meeting and sort of try to take stock and figure out how we're going to get through these next set of years together. So I think that's, some parents think I'm just trying to help you measure what's a big problem and what's a normative problem. Kids are having brain development, they're having peer associations, they're beginning to see themselves as an individual. The concept of justice and fairness is developing as their frontal lobe cortex develops. When they're 7, they don't know the difference between what you've got to treat me fair. But when they're 16, the frontal cortex is screaming out, "Hey, wait a minute! I don't deserve to be yelled at like this. I'm an individual. I'm a person. I need to be treated more fairly." And I think you have to sort of recalibrate how we discipline, how we treat, that it's a more give and take. It's a little more democratic. It's a little more, what do you think before what do I think? Kids need to feel involved in the process of negotiation if you want them to be more civil and at the table. It's when kids feel, you're not listening to me. You're treating me like I'm 7. You're just telling me what to do. I should do this because you're my father. Those lines don't work for a 16-year-old.
I think,
This is a kid. Oh, go ahead.
I think assessing this for your family is very challenging. And if you grew up, I mean, I deal with parents all the time that grew up in households where yelling and criticism and shaming and blaming were all normal. And so, we know more about brain science now, and we know what it means to be having the kinds of arguments that trigger, fight, flight, or freeze in your kid's brain. And we know what it's like kids are walking around in a world that's triggering that for them. And at Peace and Home, we're saying to parents, we want you to be the safe place. We want the home to be the sanctuary. At the same time, I remember my foster son saying, "I need to argue with you at least 5 minutes a day." And in a way, he was right. I mean, that was part of his individuation, was to debate with me really intensely about things. And as long as we were debating and nobody was calling anybody names or anything, I gave him his 5 or 10 minutes a day. But I think that, parents assessing whether this is harmful to their kids or not is hard to do. And it's something you may want to get some professional consultation on, because yelling, screaming, threatening, punishing, criticizing, this is so normal in our families, and our kids don't have the extra space for you to do that. Parents could get away with it more before. And since the pandemic, kids are coming home in a state of activation where they need you to be their calm space. And so this is a much harder question to answer. What do your kids need? But I'm going to throw in here, Guy, We actually have a handout about this that I've been developing over years. If anyone's interested in receiving it, just email us at solutions@peaceathomeparenting.com. And any follow-up to this conversation, you can email us at solutions@peaceathomeparenting.com, and we'll connect you up with resources to respond to all the big questions we're bringing up here. And, you know, we tell parents now, avoid giving unsolicited advice. My daughter will tell you I'm terrible at this. Avoid arguing in any way other than just a conversation or a debate, a discussion about stuff. Avoid criticism. And in fact, there's some research that criticism is associated with depression in kids. So, and some of you this may be just like the air you breathe. So this is challenging. But, you know, when Guy's describing home, the family being the safety net, it doesn't mean you have to be the Buddha, but it does mean you have to learn about yourself. And it does mean that we have to extend ourselves as parents right now. It's much harder because of this pediatric mental health crisis. And because if you're a working parent, you're probably in the majority that are feeling at least a little bit burnt out at this point. So the conversation about what does my child need in order to feel supported, they may be able to answer some of that, they may not. And you can learn a lot of that. You can learn a lot of that at Peace at Home. You can learn a lot of that in family therapy. And what family therapists often do, you can do a couple of sessions with a family therapist and say, I just want to know the best way to support my kid. And right now they're struggling with anxiety. So how can I support my kid? And you can just do a couple of sessions, and the therapists, if they're good, are largely a conversation facilitator. They're not going to tell you how to support your kid. They may give you some ideas, as we will, but they'll help you listen and observe. Listen to your child and observe. Behavior is always has a story behind it. So if your child is spending the whole day in their room and they're never coming downstairs, there's a story there. There's an unmet need there, and you want to learn how to listen. I want to say that one of the best tools that we teach parents and that I think is helpful to families is simply what we call reflective listening. And that means your kid comes home and says what an asshole their math teacher is. And instead of saying, don't talk that way, and you know you didn't study for your quiz, you're listening. You're saying, wow, you sound really mad at your math teacher. You're simply reflecting the emotion you're hearing and the content. And the child, that's called an open response. And the child may walk away, which is okay, or the child may continue. It invites them to continue, and they may tell you how terrible it is. And there's steps you can take to listen without giving unsolicited advice, to listen without criticism or judgment, and coach problem solving without fixing it for them. So, you know, if you're interested in those kinds of strategies, get in touch. But I'm happy to send you our handout about how to create home as a sanctuary, but those are some of the unsolicited advice and criticism, I think, are two of the toughest ones. I think I may have a question. I'm going to check. No. Remember, if you have any questions, we're going to answer very pragmatically. Guy is sort of a theorist. He's talking about the big picture. I'm a pragmatic, but between the two of us, you'll get your answers here.
Well, let's I think what you just said is a pretty profound cornerstone. This ability to listen without reacting. I mean, it is what kids want.
It's what everybody wants. It's not just kids.
Yeah. And I think if parents could, I'm just going to say what you said, just to say it again, because it can't be more important. If parents can restrain their impulse to react, to fix, to change, to turn it around and blame, and just say, tell me more, you know, something as a metaphor. Well, what happened? How did it go? Well, oh boy, you must have been upset about that. It can transform the mood for the rest of the night. 10 minutes of listening to a kid. Now, I'm not saying you listen to the kid, my teacher's a jerk, and then, you know. but the events, I failed it, he failed me. That's upsetting. That's upsetting. And to try to help the kid deal with he's angry, but the words he doesn't know is, I also feel embarrassed. I also feel ashamed. Other kids are seeing how stupid I am. And that's why I threw the chair, not because I was angry, but I was trying to deflect away from my vulnerability. And I think using Ruth's, strategy of just listening more before reacting, before trying to solve, can just transform the way many conversations go. And it just seems to be the hardest lesson for us parents to learn.
Well, I mean, we have so many opinions and we want to protect our kids and we want to shield them. So we're going to say, well, if you study more next time, you'll do better. And we think that's parent guidance, but it's really unsolicited advice. And you're going to get into an argument about that. That's going to create a new argument instead of you soothing the child. When this parent asked, how do I support my kid? This is one of the best tools. And when Guy made that connection between shame and aggressive behavior, that, what we say at Peace at Home is that it is, the kids aren't having a hard time. They're not giving you a hard time. They're having a hard time. And our job is to understand the logic of the behavior by being deep listeners. And it doesn't mean becoming their therapist. So I want to clarify this. It's simply listening in a way that invites them to think about it. So you might say, so you got so mad that you ended up throwing a chair. Wow. And you can say, what were you wishing would happen? What were you hoping you could make happen there? And just listening in an open way and knowing that there's logic behind behavior, even when it seems crazy, will slow you down a lot. We have a question, Guy, about therapy for 3 and 4-year-olds. This is a place where I'm really opinionated. So you better temper me because I know you know research. So I want to say, someone's asking about therapy for 3 and 4-year-olds. I've had parents say to me that their 7-year-old has a chemical imbalance because the parent does. And I get really frustrated because I think this is just kind of an easy way out. I want to say a couple of things before Guy responds to this. One is, our favorite book at Peace at Home right now is called Brain Body Parenting by Mona Delahook. And I hope our tech support, Allie, will put that into the chat. Mona Delahook is Delahooke, Mona Delahook, and her book is Brain Body Parenting. And she's talking about the neurobiology of behavior. And it really helps parents have a different perspective on this. It's a little dense, but she's very parent friendly. So I strongly suggest it. Whether kids have biochemical imbalances or not, I think that before we put them into therapy, we want to make sure we're using approaches at home that matches this child's needs. And do you know Ross Green, Guy? Ross Green, Plan B. No. He's great. Well, Ross Green had a book called, I think, Plan B, and then he rewrote the book and called it Raising Adults, I think. Raising an Adult. But he has something called lagging social skills. He has a list of lagging social skills, which I think is very helpful for parents, particularly talking to schools about kids. But Allie, if you can find Ross Green's website, I'd love it. I can't remember what it's called. I used to use it all the time. But we can get you the list, and it includes things like having trouble with transitions, or not being able to notice what feelings I'm having, not being able to name the feelings I'm having, and lives in the balance. That's it. Thank you, Allie. And for particularly with 3 and 4-year-olds, one of the things we want to keep in mind with young children is that the emotions center from birth to 5, the emotion center is developing much faster than the thinking parts of the brain. So kids have big emotions and can't always pull on their thinking skills to solve problems. So they're not as good problem solvers as they will be later on. And with 3 and 4-year-olds, the very first thing I want parents to do is to look at, do we have some lagging social skills here? Look at, what am I doing? What's happening at home? What's the environment first before we think about therapy? It's not to say you never send 3 and 4-year-olds to therapy, but we want to look at us as parents. And I say this about all kids because that's my bias, but we want to look at what's happening at home first and see if we can make some of those adjustments. You can, this parent, please email us at solutions@peaceathomeparenting.com for lots of resources for birth to 5. Guy, do you have something to add to all this?
It's hard to find a good therapist working with young kids. It's really unfortunate, even in the private practice world. I myself have never come across a group therapy model for young children. I've been involved with therapeutic sort of preschool environments where the preschool staff are trained to think psychologically and use, conflicts in the room and sharing in the room and events in the room to help kids express their feelings better. And, that it's more in a play environment that with a good mentor that kids, gain those kinds of skills. So I'm not sure what a group therapy, children are not, verbally oriented. Their skill set that's not how they're mainly expressing themselves. So a group therapy that's not play-based might be, and maybe that's what you're talking about, some kids in a play environment and then use the play environment to help kids solve problems and work together. And so I mean, I would just be trying to think about that. Certainly there's play therapy for usually individual kids, sand tray and dolls and all kinds of ways to get the expression of feelings. But I again think parents can go into therapy with their young children and learn from a therapist how to be more attentive, how to be more psychologically minded, how to understand the cues, that when a kid has a temper tantrum, it's not because he's a bad kid. It's what's he upset about that he's not able to say, what's scaring him that he's unable to, come to me for. And I'm just always thinking parent child improving, as Ruth was saying, whether you do it at home through some worksheets or some good books, or whether you go into the therapy room and, kind of learn the emotional cues of your kid. They're trying to say things. They just don't know how. They don't have the language. They don't have the self-regulation. You could play a key role in helping them discover better ways of coping and improving their trust in you, their reliance on you for sorting things out. And so I'm always just more of an advocate of a parent-child experience like that. The other thing I'd say is, and this is, I mean, I think if you have kids who are not severely troubled, but you're still sort of struggling with how do I handle these day-to-day things in a way that's helpful, you go to Ruth. And this is a parenting program that has all the best skills, all the best science about what we know about parenting. And we're not talking spoiling kids. It's all this stuff isn't about spoiling kids. It's about providing warmth and structure and how to do the balance of those things. And if your kid's a normative kid with some mild struggles, you can get parent education help. If your kid's got more mental health problems, anxiety, bedwetting, not going to school, depression, These are things that are more serious problems that, you're not expected to be treating. But I have often sent parents to a therapist to get help with their kids. You don't have to take your kid to therapy. I've done plenty of work with the parents alone, and I've never seen the adolescent. And I've transformed their family life because the parents are coming in and here's what happened and here's how we handled it. And here's what we did. Okay, let's think about this and let's think about that. Let's think about your parental teamwork. Are you two helping each other? Are you cooperating? And so there's a lot of help you could get to be a better, to help your kid better without taking your kid to therapy and taking your kid to therapy with you is a fine thing to do. So.
And actually that was most of my private practice before I started Peace at Home, was only seeing parents. I didn't want to see kids. And we would address kids' symptoms through the parent-child relationship, but that isn't always the answer, but it often can help. And sometimes it's the answer. And this mom that's talking about her 3 and 4-year-old is talking about childcare professionals that are labeling kids. And I think that this goes on a lot. Childcare professionals are very underpaid. They do one of the biggest, most important jobs in the world, and they're poorly paid, and there's a lot of turnover, and they're not always prepared. And not all childcare centers are NAEYC, National Association for the Education of Young Children, accredited. And even those, you don't always have that consistent approach. However, if you are aware that your child is either being labeled or punished, or, if the behavior is being addressed in a way that you're concerned about, I encourage you to speak with the director of the child care center. And we have a team of birth to 5 experts here, and we sometimes consult with both the parents and the caregivers. So if there's challenges with young children, you can include caregivers on the consultation session, the Zoom meeting. And we'll talk to you and the caregivers together and help everybody get on the same page and try to use practices that are evidence-based versus, and I have to say, we're hearing from childcare, we train childcare professionals sometimes, and we're hearing that kids are much more aggressive at much earlier ages now. One child care center called us and said there was a fight club that sort of broke out with the 3 and 4-year-olds beating on the teacher, and it was quite shocking. But that aggression it's it's in our environment, and it's related to stress, so it's not unpredictable right now. We only have a couple of more minutes. I want to make sure if you have that question sort of going around the back of your head, please send it in, raise your hand. We'd love to hear from you. If something is bouncing around for you afterwards, email us at solutions@peaceandhomeparenting.com. I want to say that Guy mentioned school refusal, and we actually have a quick video on that with some basic principles for how you can go about helping your child return to school. And we have, I think, several classes on tantrums and recognizing the triggers and recognizing strategies that can prevent them. I mean, tantrums in young children are within the range of normal, but the number of tantrums, the intensity, the frequency, that's important for us to think about together. And we certainly have tools around that. And we talk about tantrums all the time here at Peace at Home. And we also deal with parent tantrums as well. Guy, before we go, is there any last thoughts you want to make about the parent role in, before we go, I want to say one thing. We created a class on parents' role in children's mental health treatment. And we talk about some basics in there, and I just want to say some of them out loud. And Guy, if you have any thoughts about it, let me know. I think it's important in every child treatment situation for parents to be part of the goal setting of the treatment. So I think the parents and the kids and the therapist all need to be on the same page about why are we in therapy? Why is the child in therapy? And how will we know when it's done? What are the goals? Very specifically. So even if it's you have a chronically oppositional child and they don't follow directions, if they're following directions half the time, have we reached the goal? So it's not this forever ongoing, let's just stay in therapy forever. So parents being part of the goals, parents being part of the assessment, sort of checking in periodically to say, talk about progress. This is what we're seeing at home. How's the child progressing? How do they see the progress? And parents helping children if they feel like they need to change therapists and being willing to do that. Do you have any thoughts about any of that, Guy? The parent role?
Well, about that particular slight, I mean, parents take kids to therapy. Kids don't go to therapy. So any therapist is going to want to meet with a parent and understand why you're bringing your kid and what the goals are, and what do you want to get out of it. And if they have some flexible skill sets, they'll say, why don't you come in for a couple sessions? Why don't you be part of it? Why don't you and I meet alone together for once? I'd like to hear more detail how things are going. And, particularly with younger kids, I think it's the concerns of that first, I think there's a lot less concern about the sacred relationship and confidentiality. A teenager may have more feelings of, I don't want you seeing my therapist, then I won't feel like I can be honest with them. That should be able to be dealt with as well. But this is your child, and you're hiring this professional to help you have a better family at home. And if they're not willing to help you with some of these problems, I think about finding someone else. Not that they have to be a family therapist or you have to go in and be there all the time. I'm not saying that, but any therapist that's not reaching out to you and talking with you, and look, your 9-year-old kid's, this, and let's talk about that. And why don't you and dad come in next week? I gotta, there's some things they should just be a little more fluid in how they work with you. And you need as much help as they do.
Amen.
Child mental health problems are really family mental health problems. Either the family is a little bit in disarray and can be fueling some of these child problems, or the child's becoming more difficult and it's fueling conflicts at home. Some of these more biologically driven problems, sleep problems, ADHD, bipolar depression. Some of these things are really emerging out of the kid, and families are falling apart trying to figure out how to help their kid. So we see this as a family event, a family affair, not just Johnny who's struggling. And we think the family, the parents particularly, should be getting help, getting advice along the way as kids are getting help from a therapist.
Amen. Thank you. Before we go, this is your last chance to ask any questions. Raise your hand, send us a chat, and we're happy to hear from you after class. There's going to be a survey that pops up, and we love your feedback. It's really helpful to us. It gives us a shot in the arm, tell us we're going in the right direction, or redirects us. We're always adjusting based on parent feedback, so we'd love to hear from you. And Guy, I want to thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this. I'm going to take out little quips of this and share it with people. And I really loved your closing comments. I rarely can't add anything to what guests say, but I really can't. That captured the heart of what this was all about. Thank you for being here.
Good.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Hope we'll see you soon.